The air in our kitchen in Oak Creek, Pennsylvania, had a way of holding on to smells. The scent of roasted coffee, the faint citrus of the floor cleaner Elena liked, and the lingering aroma of the sourdough bread I'd toasted that morning. It was a normal Tuesday, or it should have been. I was leaning against the marble island, checking the weather on my phone, wondering if the gray clouds over the Allegheny Mountains were going to break before I had to drive to the office. Then I heard her footsteps. They weren't the light, rhythmic taps I'd grown used to over 15 years of marriage. They were heavy, deliberate, and final. I looked up and the world seemed to tilt. Elena was standing by the pantry, her face a mask of pale determination. Her hands were gripped so tightly around the edge of the counter that her knuckles were the color of bone. She didn't look at me. Not really. She looked through me as if I were a ghost already haunting the house we'd built together. "Mark," she said. The word didn't float. It sank. It was cracked, like a piece of dry timber under too much pressure. "I can't do this anymore. I've reached my limit. I want a divorce." The silence that followed was visceral. It felt like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room, leaving me gasping in a vacuum. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was 8:14 a.m. In 1 second, my entire identity, husband, partner, provider, had been stripped away. I searched her eyes for a flicker of doubt, a sign that this was just a heated moment or a cry for help. But there was nothing but a cold, hard finality. Those were the eyes of a woman who had already moved out of our life months ago. Her body was just finally catching up. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Welcome back to Family Secrets and Revenge, where we pull back the curtain on the lives people pretend to lead. How do you react when the person who promised to grow old with you suddenly treats you like a stranger? I remember my eyes drifting to the mantel in the living room, visible from where I stood, paralyzed in the kitchen. There was a photo of us from our wedding day in a small chapel outside of Scranton. We were 24, painfully optimistic, and so broke we'd had our reception at a local diner. Yeah, we looked invincible. Now we had the 4-bedroom colonial. We had the luxury SUV in the driveway. We had the manicured lawn and the respect of the Oak Creek Country Club. But standing there looking at Elena, I realized we had built a cathedral around a vacuum. She began to talk, her voice gaining a robotic kind of strength. She spoke about drifting apart, about the loss of a spark, and the quintessential modern phrase, needing to find herself. I listened, but I wasn't really hearing the words. I was looking for the subtext. When a spouse says they need to find themselves, they usually mean they've already found someone else, and they're just waiting for the right moment to jump. I could smell the lie. It was a sharp, acidic scent that cut through the citrus cleaner. "Is there someone else, Elena?" I asked. My voice sounded deeper, steadier than I felt. She flinched. For a second, the mask slipped. "This isn't about someone else, Mark. It's about me. I feel suffocated. I feel like I'm playing a role in a play I never auditioned for." She spoke about the monotony of our life, the way the silence between us during dinner felt like a weight. She didn't mention the dinners she spent on her phone, or the way she'd pull away when I tried to hold her hand in the theater. No, in her version of the story, I was the warden, and this beautiful house was the prison. The speed of the collapse was dizzying. Within 48 hours, the woman I had shared a bed with for over 5,000 nights was a collection of cardboard boxes and suitcases. She didn't want the house. She didn't want the furniture we'd picked out together in Philadelphia. She wanted the liquid assets, the savings, the stocks, the immediate cash. "I just want a clean break," she said, avoiding my gaze as she zipped up her final bag. She moved into a high-rise downtown, a glass and steel monolith that overlooked the river. It was the kind of place people move to when they want to pretend they're 22 and unburdened. I stayed in our silent house. The quiet was the worst part. Every time the refrigerator hummed or the heating vents clicked, I'd turn my head expecting to see her walk around the corner. But she never did. Instead, a week later, a man in a cheap suit knocked on my door and handed me a thick envelope. Legal papers. The petition for dissolution of marriage. She wasn't just leaving, she was erasing us with professional efficiency. I sat on the floor of our empty hallway and read every word. She was asking for 50% of everything, plus alimony, citing irreconcilable differences. It felt like reading an autopsy report of a body that was still warm. About 10 days after the kitchen incident, I went into the guest room to see if she'd left anything behind that I needed to box up. Under the bed, tucked behind a spare pillow, I found her old iPad. She'd upgraded to a newer model a month ago, and this one must have slipped through the cracks of her hurried exit. I hesitated. I know what people say about privacy, but trust is a two-way street, and she'd already demolished the road. I swiped the screen. It wasn't locked. I didn't find photos. I found an app called Signal, and inside I found a thread of messages that made my blood turn to ice. They were with a man named Julian. His profile picture showed a man in his late 30s with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that looked like it had been bought and paid for. He called himself a lifestyle and transition coach. As I scrolled, the narrative of my divorce began to rewrite itself. Julian hadn't been coaching her on her life. He had been grooming her. He'd been feeding her lines for nearly a year. "Mark is the anchor," one message read. "You are a bird meant for the stratosphere, Elena. Why let a man who thinks in spreadsheets hold back a woman who feels in color? He was the wind, and I was the weight." He had convinced her that our life was a cage, and he held the only key. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think Mark had a right to look into that iPad? Or should he have stayed in the dark? As I sat on that guest room floor, the grief I'd been carrying started to transmute into something else. Something colder. Something sharper. I opened my laptop and started doing what I do best. I started following the money. If Elena thought I was just a man who thinks in spreadsheets, she was about to find out how dangerous a spreadsheet can be. I began auditing our joint accounts, looking for the leak I knew had to be there. Julian's coaching wasn't free, and Elena didn't have an independent income that could support a downtown high-rise and a transition coach on her own. I found it within 3 hours. It was elegant, I'll give her that. Small transfers. $400 here, $900 there, labeled as groceries, Home Depot, or charity. But they all flowed into a secondary PayPal account, which then vanished into a private offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands. She had been funneling our retirement savings into a freedom fund for 14 months. She hadn't just decided to leave on Tuesday, she had been embezzling from our future while kissing me goodnight. She wanted to bankrupt me emotionally and then leave me financially crippled while she flew away with her wind. But she made one fatal mistake. She forgot that I was the one who taught her how to set up those accounts in the first place. I didn't call her. I didn't send a screaming text. I didn't even tell my lawyer yet. Instead, I went to the old boxing gym on the south side of Oak Creek. I hit the bag until my knuckles bled and my lungs burned. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in a decade. I stopped being the grieving husband and became the investigator. I started digging into Julian. Julian wasn't a coach. He wasn't even Julian. His real name was Marcus Thorne, and he had a history that stretched from Ohio to Georgia. He was a professional parasite. He targeted women in affluent suburbs, women who felt unseen, and convinced them to liquidate their lives. Elena wasn't walking into a new life. She was walking into a slaughterhouse, and the most twisted part? I realized that if I stopped her now, she'd never believe me. She'd think I was just the anchor trying to hold her back. For the revenge to work, she had to see the predator for herself. 3 weeks later, the Oak Creek Children's Hospital gala arrived. Most men in my position would have stayed home. I spent that Saturday afternoon at the best tailor in the county. Then when I walked into that ballroom, the air seemed to ripple. Then they arrived. Elena looked stunning, but fragile. And there he was, Julian. He had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the room like a prize horse. I didn't turn away. I headed straight for them. The whispers started immediately. I could see the sweat on Julian's brow. He expected a scene, a broken man begging for his wife back. I gave him the opposite. I gave him a predator's calm. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. I approached them with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Elena, I said, my voice steady. You look radiant. She froze. Mark, I, I didn't expect to see you here. Why not? I replied, turning to Julian. Sure, and you must be Julian, the man who's been coaching my wife. I was just telling our attorney that I'm actually relieved. Taking over the mortgage on the colonial is a big responsibility, Julian. I hope you're ready for those property taxes in Oak Creek. I saw the flicker of confusion in Julian's eyes. He wasn't looking for a mortgage. He was looking for a payout. I leaned in closer to Elena. And Elena, dear, I'm sure you've handled that IRS notice regarding the offshore account. Since you withdrew the funds, the liability is all yours now. The color drained from her face. Julian's grip on her back loosened instantly. I had just turned his prize into a financial anchor. I watched his brain work, calculating the risk, the legal exposure, and the fact that the rich suburban wife was now a broke legal liability. The aftermath was predictable. Julian specialized in easy prey, not federal tax audits. Over the next few days, I watched the digital trail. Elena's messages to him became frantic. Julian, why aren't you answering? Where are you? His responses stopped altogether. He had meetings in New York. The man who had been her wind was suddenly a dead calm. Elena was realizing that she had burned every bridge for a man who wouldn't even return her calls the moment things got heavy. She sat in that high-rise looking at the city lights, waiting for a savior who was already looking for his next mark in a different zip code. The high-rise apartment was now a glass cage. Without my income, and with the Freedom Fund frozen due to the legal maneuvers I'd initiated, Elena was drowning. She reached out to her sister, Sarah. Sarah told her, "You left a good man for a con artist. Don't call me." Isolation is a powerful teacher. She was learning that finding yourself is a lot harder when you have no one left to recognize who you used to be. Every evening she would look at the door, hoping for a knock that never came. She was learning that the freedom Julian promised was just a synonym for loneliness. On a rainy Friday night, my phone buzzed. I let it ring. I waited 10 minutes before I pressed play on the voicemail. Mark, her voice was a hollow rattle. I think I made a terrible mistake. Julian. He isn't who he said he was. He took things, Mark. I'm scared. Can we please just talk? I sat in the dark, listening to the rain hit the window pane of my study. I thought about the 15 years of trust she'd discarded like trash. I thought about the 14 months of embezzlement. I didn't call back. I deleted the message. I wasn't just sitting idle. I'd handed over my forensic audit to the local PD. I had documented every transfer Marcus Thorne had coerced from Elena. I wasn't doing it to save her. I was doing it to make sure that when the dust settled, there was a paper trail that proved exactly what had happened. If you were in my shoes facing a situation like this, what would you do? Would you help the person who betrayed you because they were being hunted by a bigger predator? Or would you let them face the consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments. The end of Elena's new life happened with a neon sign. By the first of the month, her rent was overdue. Anna in the high-rise management triggered the lockout. Julian had been thorough. He drained the digital wallet she'd set up. She was left with $84 in a suitcase. She spent that night in a dingy motel called the Pine View, staring at a water-stained ceiling. The woman who wanted the stratosphere was now sleeping on sheets that smelled of industrial detergent and despair. She had reached the rock bottom of her evolution. 1 month to the day after she left, I heard the front door click open. I was in the kitchen, right where she left me. She walked in, looking like a shadow. She stood in the exact same spot where the nightmare had begun. "Mark," she whispered, "I'm so sorry, he's gone. And he took everything. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, I just want to come home." She started to sob. In a movie, this is where I would hold her. But I didn't move. I just watched the steam rise from my coffee cup. "You are home, Elena," I said quietly, "but I'm not. I sold the house this morning. The closing is in 2 weeks." Her jaw dropped. "You sold it? Without telling me?" "You'll get your half," I said, sliding a folder across the island. "Minus the Freedom Fund you embezzled and the legal fees I've incurred. That's your clean break, Elena. Isn't that what you wanted?" I watched her realization. The home she thought was her safety net was gone. I had liquidated our life just as efficiently as she had tried to liquidate me. The final meeting at the law office was cold. Elena signed the papers with a trembling hand. Because of the evidence of her financial infidelity, her leverage was non-existent. Every stroke of the pen was a nail in the coffin of the life she'd thrown away. She walked out into the Pennsylvania rain, a woman with a check for a fraction of what she'd once possessed. She stood in the parking lot, looking at the gray sky, realizing that the wind had blown her straight into a storm she couldn't survive. I moved to a small town on the coast of Maine. I bought a small boat. I don't think in spreadsheets as much anymore. As for Elena, she moved back in with her parents in Ohio. Occasionally, she sends an email at 2 a.m., full of remember whens. I don't respond. I have a new life now, one built on the truth, not the facade of a suburban dream. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. Elena wanted a life without the anchor, only to realize that the anchor was the only thing keeping her from drifting out to sea. Once she had the revenge she thought she wanted, independence, but she lost the one thing that actually mattered. Before I sign off, I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone throw away everything for a dream that turned out to be a nightmare? Tell me your story in the comments below. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful cinematic stories to light. Until next time, take care of your heart and remember, not every secret stays hidden forever.